There was a clear effort to erase it from our memory, our collective memories, from the news and everyday conversations. And most people didn't realize that a century ago, the second Ku Klux Klan had been founded.
At the National Democratic Convention in New York in 1924, it is estimated that at least 350 delegates were Klansmen, and they were responsible for the defeat of Governor Alfred Smith as the Democratic nominee. By 1925, the Ku Klux Klan was big business. Almost 6 million Americans now belonged to the Klan, and the organization was grossing $75 million a year. Some 40,000 Klansmen and Klanswomen crowded into Washington on August 8, 1925, to parade down Pennsylvania Avenue. To help the Klan coffers, a flag was used to catch money thrown in by spectators.
There's a picture about page 160 in the book showing over 30,000 Ku Klux Klan members in full regalia, Reverend, pointed hats, the robes, marching down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., Jesse, you know all about this. Washington, D.C. If my memory is correct, there were 37 members of the House of Representatives who were open members of the Klan. There were 5, if I'm not mistaken, could have been 7, I think it was 5 members of the United States Senate, open members of the Klan. That's what great nations do. They come to terms with their dark sides.
What? Yes. History tells us that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have 2 distinct legacies. The Republican Party's legacy includes the abolitionists, the NAACP, black colleges, the Emancipation Proclamation, and a multitude of civil rights legislation. The Democratic Party's legacy includes fugitive slave laws, black codes, the Dred Scott decision, Jim Crow laws, and the Ku Klux Klan. After completing my research on the legacies of both political parties, I had to ask myself, how can anyone pledge their loyalty to a political party whose legacy includes lies, lynching, litigation, and legislation that destroyed the lives of millions of blacks? That's when I decided to document my findings in my book, Unfounded Loyalty. In my brief, I told the court that in an effort to impede and deny African Americans the same constitutional rights afforded to all American citizens, the Democratic Party established a pattern of practices by promoting, supporting, sponsoring, financing racially biased entertainment, education, legislation, litigation, and terrorist organizations from 1792 to 1962, and continued certain practices up to 2002. The Democrats' 210 years of racist practices and cover-ups not only negatively affected the entire black race, but these practices infected the entire nation with the most contagious and debilitating social disease known to mankind, called racism. Finally, during the past 21 decades, the Democrats successfully disguised and concealed their horrific acts against African Americans by operating and committing these acts under a multitude of aliases. Aliases, names like the Confederacy, Jim Crow, Black Codes, Dixiecrats, and the Ku Klux Klan. Congressional records and historical documents and letters and testimonies from several brave black citizens reveal that these weren't separate, independent organizations, but they were actual auxiliaries and divisions and/or the legislative efforts of the Democratic Party. Senate Bill number 60 was a bill to give African Americans 40 acres and a mule. It was a done deal. We wouldn't be talking about reparations today Had the Democratic president at that time signed the bill into law, Democratic President Andrew Johnson vetoed Senate Bill 60. That's why we're still talking about reparations today. Every effort to stop blacks from having the same rights as white citizens was the proud work of the Democratic Party.
Which by and large is an excellent platform of which all Republicans can be proud and can proudly differ as to sections if they so wish. After all, this is not a Democratic convention. I therefore move that the following language be inserted as a new full paragraph between the present 6th and 7th paragraphs under the section, quote, headed for, the section headed, quote, for a free people, unquote. This language, the Republican Party fully respects the contribution of responsible criticism and defends the right of dissent in the democratic process. But we repudiate the efforts of irresponsible extremist groups such as the Communists, the Ku Klux Klan, the John Birch Society, and others.
We can make it out from here is coming entirely from the delegations in the east.
Our party, by their efforts to infiltrate positions of responsibility in the party, or to attach themselves to its candidates. Mr. Chairman.
The principles of our freedom forbid it. Morality forbids it. And the law I will sign tonight forbids it.
Hi, I'm Robert Brammer. I'm a law librarian at the Law Library of Congress, and I'm in here to introduce you to some personalities in the '64 Civil Rights Act. One of the people I want to point out is Howard Smith. Representative Smith was the chair of the House Rules Committee, and the reason for that is because the House is so big, they can't just have a free-form debate. Now, Representative Smith was a segregationist. That is, he was definitely not in favor of the '64 Civil Rights Act. I also want to point out another key player. Once the bill arrives in the Senate, it's subject to a filibuster led by Southern Democrats. The leader of the Southern Democrats was Richard Russell. And the interesting thing about Richard Russell is Richard Russell actually was Lyndon Johnson's mentor. And if you look up here on the wall, you'll see that although Richard Russell was Lyndon Johnson's mentor, by the time Lyndon Johnson was president and was pushing very hard to pass the '64 Civil Rights Act as a tribute to President Kennedy, their relationship had obviously frayed a bit, as depicted in this comic. So Russell led the enormous filibuster against the '64 Civil Rights Act, and the Democrats knew that they could not break the filibuster without enlisting the support of the Republicans. And to enlist the support of the Republicans, they had to court Everett Dirksen. Dirksen is the Senate Minority Leader, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. And they need him and his Republicans to vote in favor of closure to end the filibuster and then ultimately pass the legislation. After adding some amendments to Title VII, which were fairly minor in scope, Everett Dirksen then threw his support behind the '64 Civil Rights Act, enlisted the Republicans to vote for closure, to end the filibuster, and ultimately passed the act. The '64 Civil Rights Act is absolutely vital in restarting Reconstruction and living up to the promise that all men are created equal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. I appreciate your